We'll begin our discussion of surveys and survey research with a short introduction to survey design. Let me start by saying that surveys remain the most common data collection method in management, and that multiple disciplines within management, and more broadly, multiple disciplines in social science, use surveys. The closer look at surveys reveals important differences, and I would like to take a few moments to consider the different types of surveys found in management. As I mentioned earlier, survey is a research design where primary data is collected from individuals at a point in time in order to generate large sample of quantitative data that can then be analyzed to arrive at descriptive or causal conclusions. Survey is more than a method of data collection because it implies a range of data collection, analysis and evaluation techniques. If you embark on a survey, then by default you are committing yourself to objectivist ontology and positivistic epistemology. That is, you will be looking for facts, fundamental laws, assuming that these can be drawn from a large sample, and you will be looking for standardized, consistent and predetermined answers to questions. In general, surveys sit within primary data collection designs, alongside less structured forms of data gathering such as interviews or observations. In management, we tend to collect primary data from surveys or otherwise because we are frequently interested in phenomena where no secondary data exists. For example, employee surveys or consumer surveys provide insights about attitudes, beliefs and behaviors of individuals that cannot be gauged from secondary data. This absence of secondary data is typical for management research and distinguishes it from other fields of social science such as education or sociology, or indeed other business subjects such as economics and accounting, where the use of secondary data is common. This is not to say that secondary surveys or surveys containing secondary data do not exist in management. There is evidence that their use is growing, in particular in entrepreneurship, strategy or IB research. Here are a few examples of existing datasets in social science that you can use, and a link to a UK data archive through which such databases can be accessed. Despite their good access, if you are a mainstream management scholar, you are unlikely to use secondary datasets for two reasons. Firstly, because they do not tend to explore issues that are pertinent to management problems, and secondly, because as a PhD student, you need to show a significant contribution to knowledge, and for that reason you are very unlikely to use secondary data. Considering the primary objective, we can distinguish between descriptive and analytical surveys. Descriptive surveys are designed to measure characteristics of a particular population, either at a fixed point in time or comparatively over time. They measure what occurred rather than why it has occurred, and they are used in a wide range of setups such as market and marketing research, public opinion research, polling, voting intention, or social research. By contrast, analytical surveys attempt to use data from a cross-sectional sample to explore or test theory with the principal aim of looking for associations between variables. In management research, analytical surveys typically look to explain one or more dependent variable with one or more independent variables. And typically, surveys will use combination of variables to measure abstract concepts such as satisfaction, motivation, commitment, trust, etc. The surveys will then employ various multivariate techniques to analyze the data. Within the field of management, you will find different surveys, and one key area of difference is the unit of analysis they attempt to capture and subsequently how that unit is sampled. Some disciplines, such as international business or strategy, are concerned with a firm, its characteristics and its performance, and this unit of analysis is reflected in questionnaire items, which may concern performance, competitiveness, entrepreneurial orientation, R&D activity, etc. Other disciplines within management focus on individual level phenomena. For example, marketing and HR are preoccupied with either consumers or employees. The questionnaire found in those subjects typically capture individual level variance and questions of attitudes, beliefs, perceptions, or behaviors. Different levels of analysis and different units of analysis necessitate different approaches to sampling of potential respondents. In IB and strategy research, for example, we are searching for firms, and sampling starts with sampling frames that list companies of interest. Sampling will then typically involve probability sampling or census, which covers all companies of a particular type. For example, in my own PhD research, I used British Export Directory to identify companies involved in international trade, and then I surveyed all companies that met my inclusion criteria. By contrast, marketeers who deal with individuals typically use convenience sampling and access consumers on the basis of ease of access to them. In HR, sampling designs may involve sampling within cases. For example, an HR survey may cover all employees within a particular firm. An example of such survey is Pate et al., who surveyed employees of one organization. The final difference in survey types concerns the methods of administration or distribution, and surveys range from the self-administered surveys, where an interviewer is not present and respondent is left to their own devices when answering questions, to interviewer-administered questionnaires, where the interviewer asks questions. Within the former, self-administered methods, you can find postal questionnaires or drop-off questionnaires or various online questionnaires. All of them have an advantage of being cheap and anonymous, but they do suffer from poor response rates and have to include quite simple and straightforward questions to avoid any confusions on the part of the respondent. By contrast, interviewer-administered surveys include face-to-face, phone, but also online surveys. The key advantages are that respondents may ask additional questions, so you may include more difficult questions. However, interviewers introduce variability due to interviewer errors, and interviewer-administered surveys tend to be more costly. Before we go on to looking at particular facets of surveys, let's just quickly recap the typical tasks that a survey may involve. Surveys start with planning and designing of the survey instrument and then go into piloting, amending survey instrument according to the results of pilot, and then collecting data, editing and coding.